Hello and welcome back to Drinking by Myself. My name is Emma and today is my first Balancing the Books of the new year. I'm filming this on the 1st of January, so I am not drinking, I'm just having some nighttime tea because I'm absolutely exhausted and have drunk so much Prosecco over the last 2 nights combined. It will not be the 1st of January when you see this. I have no idea when this is going to go up. I'm dreading editing this because I've lost my hard drive, as I've been complaining about a lot recently, and that means that I lost with it the Balancing the Books template that I always use that has like the little animated scorekeeping things. So I'm just going to make them again, which is like it's not that big a deal. I'm just calm down. They're not that complicated. I already did them once and I don't feel like making them again. So who knows when I'll actually edit this. But if you're seeing this, that means that I got my act together and did it. So, Balancing the Books for December. I started the month of December with 38 books on my TBR. And if you're watching Balancing the Books for the first time, the aim here is basically that all of the books that come onto my TBR, I balance them against all the books that go off my TBR, whether I read them or DNF them or unhaul them or whatever, and try and keep those numbers balanced. Ultimately, I want to get the number down. I'm trying to reduce my TBR every month, but, you know, at the bare minimum, it's just not allowed to get any bigger. So, casting my mind all the way back to the beginning of December 2019, it seems like a fucking decade ago now, lol. The first book that I read was Believe Me by J.P. Delaney. I don't have a copy of that with me because it was a library book, but that removed that book from my TBR. And I think I gave it like a 2, which was a shame. I thought it was terrible. Like halfway through I was really enjoying it. For a lot of the book I was really enjoying it. It was really gripping, it was a really interesting story, but the ending was just so stupid and so unbelievable that it entirely ruined the whole thing. I'm now struggling to even remember. Basically it was about a woman who, to make money, she works for a divorce lawyer. She does this like sneaky on the side work where she will go to a bar and try and get a man to hit on her, and it's the man that they are watching because they suspect he's cheating on his wife, and then they can use that as evidence for the wife to divorce him. But she has this one case she gets involved in where she tries to get this man to hit on her and he doesn't, but then that night the wife is found murdered in her hotel room. So he's a suspect and then she becomes a suspect, and it's all about that and what happens, and she starts up this relationship with this man and it's very toxic and weird. So I'm going to say the good things about it. It was really gripping. I was really enjoying it for a lot of it. And something that I thought was really cool was the main character Claire is an actress. That's what she wants to do, and that's why she likes doing this side work, because it's a chance to be an actress. Every time she was kind of putting on a part, it suddenly was written as a screenplay. And it was really clever because it was like the scenes where she's in bars trying to get guys to hit on her were written like that, but also even in a normal conversation it was kind of this clue. Suddenly there would be a bit written like a script, and it was like that was your kind of clue that she wasn't telling the truth, or that she was trying to get something out of that situation, like putting on a role to get something. So I thought that was really cool and I really liked that. So there you go, that's a good thing. But the ending was just so completely stupid that it just ended up undermining the whole thing. It was so close to being a really awesome book with a really cool, like so many twists and turns, but it didn't quite pull off what it was trying to do, which was a shame. Okay, then I hauled a book that I had already read. So I read about 2 years ago on Kindle The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Here it is. And then this, in December, for the Magical Readathon, one of the prompts was to read a book with a game or a competition or something. So I decided I would reread this book because I've been wanting to reread it for ages. I didn't particularly enjoy it the first time I read it, but I loved the premise. So I thought maybe if I try again, I'll like it more the second time. So I went and bought myself a new copy. This doesn't add to my TBR score because I had already read it, and I did then read it straight away anyway. And unfortunately, I felt exactly the same about it. I gave it a 3 stars again. I didn't hate it. It's a fantastic premise, but it's just halfway through I was like, okay, I've actually had enough now of this. Like, this was a cool premise, but it's going on for so long. So yeah, that was another meh book kicking off December. Then I read a book on Scribd, so I don't have a physical copy. That was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and I loved it so much that I'm definitely going to buy a physical copy for my collection. So again, no points on or off my TBR there because I just read it on Scribd. That was a really fun one. Again, it's been really popular on BookTube, so I'll just give you a brief summary, but it's about a girl whose sister is a serial killer and pretty much does what it says on the tin, actually. And it's told through a series of lots of really short chapters, so it's very readable, very quick to read. I read it through a combination of the audiobook and the ebook, which were both on Scribd. And I found it really funny. The character of the sister the serial killer is like such a frustrating, annoying character, but in the best way, which was really funny to read about. You're rooting for her even though she is definitely, you know, doing terrible things and the men all suck anyway, so you're kind of like on her side. It was just a really, really fun read. I enjoyed that one, and I love anything about sisters, especially serial killing ones. Okay, then I read a book that I've had on my physical TBR for a while, and that was Boy Snowbird by Helen Oyeyemi. So this is a vague Snow White retelling. Helen Oyeyemi often does these kind of fairy tale retellings, but they're more like inspired by fairy tales rather than direct retellings, because they're very different from the stories that you're familiar with. So this one is about a girl called Boy who gets married to, I've forgotten her husband's name now, I know his surname is Winman, because he already has a daughter called Snow, so she's Snow Winman. His name's like Arthur or something, Arturo, yeah. Anyway, so she gets married, and then basically where the Snow White bit kicks in is our main character Boy kind of becomes the evil stepmother in that story, because then she has her own baby and becomes very jealous and unsettled by Snow. But the Whitman family that she married into, it turns out they're harbouring this secret. And I guess it's a spoiler if I say what it is, so I won't. So instead I will just say that the book as a whole is an exploration of race and identity, and then also identity in other broader ways. And I'd heard a lot about this book before reading it, in that the ending is very controversial. A lot of people really don't like it, and I see what they mean. When it got to the ending, I thought it was a continuation of that exploration of identity. It just wasn't done as sensitively as the racial aspect was. I don't want to talk too much about the ending because it is a big plot twist, and also it is not you know, my own voice's experience to comment on whether or not it was offensive. I've heard people saying that they found it offensive, so that's kind of what matters. But the book as a whole I really, really loved. I love Helen Oyeyemi. Her books are so weird and wonderful, but this was, I think, the most readable, most like easily readable and accessible of hers I've read so far, because a lot of them, Gingerbread was the first of hers I've read, even though it's the most recent one, and I actually had to read it twice in a row. The first time I was just like, what is going on? And I just went back and read it again and then loved it. So this, I think, was the most accessible if you're looking for an entryway into Helen Oyeyemi. Okay, then I brought home from the office The Earthquake Bird by Susannah Jones, and then I read it. So this one, there's a Netflix movie with Alicia Vikander that I now want to watch. So it's a mystery thriller about a girl called Lucy, is that her name? Yeah, Lucy, who's English but living in Tokyo, working as a translator, and she becomes the suspect in a murder investigation. So it's kind of told through the police interrogation and flashbacks of what she was running away from her life back home, and then also what happened to her living in Tokyo and how she became the suspect and what really happened. So it's really, really intriguing. It's kind of told in a slightly strange way where it switches a bit between first person and third person, which makes you kind of gives this impression of Lucy not always feeling like, kind of, it's like she's disassociating, because she sometimes will talk about herself as Lucy, as if Lucy's this other person. So that was really interesting. Apparently the movie has changed the ending and has had really bad reviews of that ending. I read reviews saying like it's an amazing film ruined by a terrible ending. I haven't been saying my ratings, but My Sister the Serial Killer I think was a 5, Boy Snowbird probably a 4, The Earthquake Bird, oh, 2 birds in a row, probably 3. Then I unhauled a book. So I got given this for Christmas a few years ago by RG, Trace by Lauret Savoy. It was a book that I asked him for. It's non-fiction, so the subtitle here is Memory, History, Race and the American Landscape. And I thought it sounded really interesting, and I think it probably is amazing. But I looked at it to start reading it this month, or last month in December, and realised it's just not accessible for me. I don't know enough about this topic to even begin to start this book. So I've decided to give this one to charity for someone else to enjoy it. Then I started reading A Year of Marvellous Ways by Sarah Winman, and I DNF'd this one. I got, actually, looking at my dog ear, sorry, don't get cross with me. I actually read half of this book before DNFing it, and it wasn't, I don't know why, it just wasn't gripping me. And I love Sarah Winman. I really, really enjoyed When God Was a Rabbit. I loved Tin Man. This one was just a bit too strange, and I think it probably didn't help. It's probably like one of those books where it's just the wrong time, and I might have loved it another time. Every time I picked this book up to try and read it, I was really hungover, and I feel like when you're hungover, you don't want to read something too weird because your brain is just not functioning fast enough. It sort of sounds like it would be lovely. So it's these two stories combined. There's an 89-year-old woman named Marvellous Ways living in Cornwall, and then she finds in the water a soldier called Francis Drake who has just had a broken heart and is kind of traumatised from the war. He'd kind of given up his will to live, and then learning a new will to live from her, and them kind of talking about their shared experiences of grief together. So a really beautiful sounding story, but I didn't get into it, and I got halfway through it and was like, I'm just not compelled to pick this up. I kept putting it down and looking out the window and stuff, so I gave up on that one. I'd heard quite mixed things about it anyway. I think it's one of those people either love it or are just like, I don't get it. Okay, then on Scribd I read the graphic novel 100 Nights of Hero by Isabel Greenberg, and I loved that one, gave that one a 4. So it's kind of, you know, it's an 1001 Nights retelling. But in this one, it's a slightly different basic premise. So a woman named Cherry, her husband basically makes a bet with another man that the other man won't be able to seduce her, because he's like, no, my wife is so chaste and loyal that even I haven't been able to sleep with her, so you definitely wouldn't. So they make this bet, he has 100 nights to try and seduce her, and if he manages, then I think he can have her. But what they don't know is that Cherry is actually in love with her maid Hero, and the two of them are in a relationship and deeply in love. So Cherry's like, what can I do? How do I get out of this guy who's, you know, come to this house and is basically trying to rape me for 100 days? And Hero tells stories to distract him. And you know the 1001 Nights story, that's basically how it works. And I really liked all of that. There were really nice bits about even all of the guards stationed around getting addicted to these stories as well, and kind of taking turns who would get to be on shift there, because they all really wanted to hear the stories. And then each story are, you know, they're stories I've heard before, these are familiar stories, but just told in a really lovely way. The images were beautiful. As a graphic novel, it was a really lovely thing to look at, so I would definitely like to get myself a physical version of that to look at these pictures bigger. But also it was told with humour. It's quite kind of tongue-in-cheek almost, the way it was told. It's just a really beautifully done graphic novel, so I definitely loved that. And the theme kind of throughout it is about women's voices and the power in women's stories and women not being silenced, so loved that. Then it got to time to go home for Christmas, so as I was clearing out my locker to go home for the holiday, I brought home 5 books from work, which is lols because I've barely done any reading this whole holiday. So I brought home The Mercies by Kiran, Millwood, Hargrave. So this one is based on a true story. It's set on this Norwegian island in 1617, where it's a really small island, and on Christmas Eve there was this massive storm, and all of the men were out fishing at the time, and all of them were killed in the storm. So suddenly this island, Vardo, is a place of women who are all grieving the loss of their men and have to learn to fend for themselves and fish for themselves, which was seen as deeply inappropriate for women. And 18 months later, a very religious reverend is sent to see what's happening, because there's been accusations of witchcraft in the area, and so these women are very kind of frightening and sinister to this very old-fashioned religious group. And so then there were witch trials, and this is all a true story. It's absolutely fascinating and like horrible and unbelievable. So I brought that one home. I brought home Writers and Lovers by Lily King, which is about a woman, it's set in the 90s, it's about a woman in her early 30s who has recently lost her mother and gone through a breakup. So it's about that time of your life. It's summed up here on the back with a quote, "It's strange not to be the youngest kind of adult anymore." So it's about that kind of stage in your early 30s where you're no longer the youngest type of adult. And it's kind of a love triangle. There's 2 different men who offer very different types of futures for her, and again, you know, that stage, that time of your life in your 30s when these decisions no longer are just simple decisions about, you know, which boy do you like best. It's actually leading to 2 different futures, to like, where is your life going to go, what kind of life you're going to have. But it's apparently like it's not focused on the love triangle aspect, it's more just about exploring this woman who's the main character. Then I brought home The Sin Eater by Megan Campisi, which is a kind of historical fiction alternate history thing. So sin eaters were actually real things. I've never heard of this before, but if you were accused of a crime, your punishment would be to become a sin eater, which is when someone was on their deathbed, you had to kind of do this ritual eating different foods represent different sins to cleanse the dying person of their sins, so they can then go to heaven, and then you are left then bearing their sins, so you're doomed to be going to hell unless someone does the ritual for you. So it's about that, and I love the quote on the back that says, there's an old adage, is it adage or adage? I never know, but there's an old one of those that says, there's really only 2 stories. A man goes on a voyage, or a stranger arrives in town. This is the third. A woman breaks the rules. So just for that alone, I brought that home. I also brought home Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This one has actually been out in the States for a little while, so I've heard lots of people talking about it there, but it doesn't come out here until February, and this is a kind of Lord of the Rings YA feminist retelling. That's all I know about it, all I need to know, because that sounds great. And then finally, another YA book, Love is for Losers. So this is basically about a teenage girl and her first love. She falls in love with a girl called Emma, and it's described as being perfect for fans of Sex Education, the Netflix show, which I did love. so I don't read that much YA, but this one I've just heard is so good, and it's supposed to be just like really, really funny. Then on Scribd I read 10th of December by George Saunders. That was one for my book club, and that was a short story collection, which I really enjoyed. I'm not usually huge on short stories because just as you get into one, it then ends and then you have to start all over again. It's like, I actually don't really like starting books at all. I like that sensation of when you're into a book and you can't put it down. Starting a new book always feels a little bit like work. So for that reason, I don't usually love short stories. But I really liked this. I gave the collection 4 out of 5 stars, I think, overall. There are a few stories in there that I didn't care about as much, but there were loads that I loved. And they did feel connected because they all had this kind of like Black Mirror-esque feel to them, and they all were set in the real world, but with just these like slightly weird additions of like technologies or drugs or things that don't exist in our world. A lot of them are really dark, a lot of them are really, really sad. The last one, the title story, 10th of December, was really moving and uplifting, so that was a really sweet one. A lot of them were just like quite heavy. One of the girls in my book club said for that reason like she didn't like the collection because they were just too sad. It does make me interested in reading George Saunders because I had heard about Lincoln in the Bardo, but it just sounded like just too weird. From the description I was like, I don't understand what that book is about, so I actually hadn't had any interest in picking it up. But now, having read his short stories and I know kind of what his brand of weird is, I'm now much more interested. Then again on Scribd I listened to the audiobook of To All the Boys I've Loved Before, and I loved it so much. I have never had so much success with an audiobook. Usually I just don't really like them, so I sometimes will listen to audiobooks if I'm also physically reading it. Then I'll listen for a bit while I'm walking somewhere, but if I listen for too long I will just tune out. I can't pay attention to being talked to for too long. I really struggled with that, like at uni as well in lectures. But this one I was absolutely hooked. I just would sit there like playing a game on my phone and listening to it for hours. I absolutely loved the movie To All the Boys I've Loved Before when it came out last year. I thought it was one of the best like teen rom-coms that I've ever seen. I hadn't particularly had an interest in reading the book because that's the kind of thing that I prefer more as like a fun movie to watch. Have I watched it 8 times now? I think maybe. Whereas I don't love reading that kind of thing. But turns out this is my exception. I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to read the rest in the series. I just was like hooked on it at the time that the trailer came out for the second movie. I was completely in love with what's his name? I keep calling him Peter Kavinsky. I was completely in love with him in the first movie. I thought he was gorgeous, and now from the trailer I'm like, move over, this new guy is so beautiful. So yeah, really into that. Definitely going to read the rest. Then when I was at my parents' house I borrowed their copy of A Christmas Carol, so I thought that would be perfect for some Christmas reading. A lot of these, by the way, were for the magical readathon prompts, so I will link to all of those videos below. I did like vlogs for every chapter. I'm still doing it now, haven't finished, I'm very behind schedule, but it's been a lot of fun to vlog those. So yeah, I read A Christmas Carol, which I'd never read before, and it was really good fun. I really enjoyed it. I gave that a 4. The beginning was so funny. I wasn't expecting, I mean I haven't really read any Charles Dickens, so I wasn't expecting that, but the beginning was genuinely like PG Wodehouse style kind of funny. And then it got really spooky, and then just got really uplifting and sweet. So it's a really, it's a short little book. It didn't take long, but I really enjoyed that. It was a nice one to read at Christmas. For Christmas, I only got given one book. No one buys me books anymore because I think they, I guess seeing these videos, they know that I have no shortage. So I got this book called The House Without Windows from my parents, which is basically, so this was written by a 12-year-old, a woman called Barbara Newhall Follett. When she was 12, she wrote this kind of feminist fable that's about a girl like running away to live in the wild, and then it kind of was like rediscovered, and they were like, this is actually really brilliant. So it's got this introduction by Jackie Morris. There's also artwork by Jackie Morris throughout it. So that was my Christmas present. And then finally, I already told you what this one's about, but I then read The Mercies, so that one went off my TBR. Whew, and that's it. Which means, if I've added up right, I've been trying to write it all on my phone as I go along to add, I'm now on 39 books on my TBR, but I started on 38, so that's not great. So that means I have to get rid of one of the books left on my TBR in order to balance it out. So what am I going to choose? Please hold, I'll be right back. Don't look at my script. I can't decide. I always hate this bit. I never want to give the books away. I'm going to go on Goodreads and see, of the books on my TBR, which one's the lowest rated. Okay, the lowest rated is Frog Music by Emma Donoghue, but I really want to read that because I like Emma Donoghue. The next lowest is The Move by Felicity Everett. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is one that I'm torn. From just like reading the description, that probably isn't a book I usually would have picked up, but I went to an event at HQ and I actually spoke to Felicity Everett and she was lovely. We had a really nice chat. So just from like getting to talk to her, that made me much more excited about reading the book, but I'm not sure if it's actually like my kind of book. Alright, well the fact that it came up as the lowest, I guess, makes my decision for me. Sorry, The Move, I am going to give this one away to someone who will want to read it. I can think of lots of people who I'm sure would be interested in that one, so it'll go to a good home, and that means my books are officially balanced for the month of December, and therefore for all of 2019. So I'm finishing 2019 with a TBR of 38 books. I had been hoping to get it down to like 0 by 2019, but you know what, that didn't happen. So in 2020, I guess now the goal is get that TBR, I mean 0, I'm never gonna have 0, am I, but get that TBR down to 10 and then keep it always at 10 is a nice manageable number of books to own, I think. And I know 38 is already pretty good. People always comment like, oh my god, you've got no idea, I've got hundreds of books. I used to have a lot more books. This process has been going on for years. I have been slowly getting them down, but my personal goal is to have 10. If you have hundreds, that's fine, that's cool. I don't actually think there's anything wrong with having a massive TBR. It's rather lovely, it's like having your own personal library, but I just start to feel overwhelmed because I have books I kind of have to read for work. Then I feel like having a big TBR of my own just gets neglected because I never have time to do it, so I just want to keep that to a small manageable number so that I never feel like I'm just wasting all the books that I wanted to read. So do give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and hit that subscribe button below for new videos every week, and go over and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at drinkbymyshelf, and I will see you next time.